Thank you, and I'm going to thank the gentleman from Wisconsin and the leadership on the other side of the aisle for expediting this particular request. Very appreciative, and to all the members of the Arizona delegation for their concurrence with this designation. And I'm proud to offer this bill today to recognize a man that not only led a tremendous life of public service, served as a personal hero to many of us in Arizona, as well as the nation. His story is one worth sharing, and by designating the Douglas Port of Entry as a Raul Hector Castro Port of Entry, we will ensure this story continues to be memorialized and told, and in the future, when our revitalized port is designated for Douglas, Arizona, it will continue to bear his name. Mr. Castro was the embodiment of the American dream, and despite all the odds, he proved that with perseverance and courage, all dreams can be achieved. Mr. Castro's story, like many Americans today, began south of the border. Born June 12, 1916, in Cananea, Mexico, Mr. Castro grew up in Arizona, graduated from Douglas High School. He was the second youngest in a family of 12 children. His father was a union leader forced out of Mexico for organizing the mine in Cananea. His father died when Castro was only 12 years old, and his mother became a midwife to feed the family. Growing up on the U.S.-Mexico border near Douglas, Arizona, Castro learned many life lessons, especially when it came to the issues of prejudice and injustice. He often spoke of walking 5 miles to a segregated school while white children rode a bus to another school. He was keenly aware of the difference in the quality of jobs available to men and women that looked like him. This early prejudice and discrimination ultimately became his enduring motivation. A moment engraved in his memory is when, despite not being able to properly pronounce his name, Castro realized his grammar school teacher truly cared for him and wanted him to be a good student. Castro embraced this encouragement and became an even more determined student than he was. A stellar student, an athlete, his enthusiasm continued through college. After graduation, after a teaching job because of his race, he went on to work in the fields, picking sugar beets, and at the Douglas mining smelter, where he was paid half the wages of his white counterparts. Still, undeterred, he landed a job with the U.S. consulate in the border city of Agua Prieta, Mexico. Then, despite being told it was impossible, he fought to enter law school and eventually graduated with the J.D. from the University of Arizona. He excelled and went on to be the first elected Mexican-American county attorney and later the first Mexican-American judge in the Pima County Superior Court. This was just the beginning of Castro's improbable journey. He went on to serve as U.S. ambassador to 3 Latin American countries. Lyndon Johnson sent him to El Salvador and Bolivia, where he stayed for a short time under President Nixon before returning to Arizona and making the first of 2 bids for governor. After 2 of the closest gubernatorial elections in state history, Castro once again trumped all odds and became the state's first Latino elected to serve as governor. He defeated his opponent by less than 1 percentage point and recalls being 4,000 votes behind until the Navajo voters' ballots were counted, and that turned out to be the margin of his victory. Castro served 2.5 years as governor before resigning when President Carter asked him to be ambassador to Argentina. Let me quote directly from Raul Castro's memoir published in 2009, appropriately entitled, "Adversity is My Angel." Raul H. Castro, in the introduction it starts, Raul H. Castro's unlikely but distinguished professional career suggests that the adversity inherent in his humble beginnings only hardened his resolve and strengthened his determination. He was born into grinding poverty and minority status on the U.S.-Mexico border, but eventually overcame these obstacles to become, among other titles, Arizona's first Hispanic governor. Castro's story, which suggests much about the human spirit and the hope of the American dream, is one that ought to be told. In that introduction, it continues, yet in spite of such disadvantaged beginnings, Castro found a way to get an education and embark on his path to the prominent positions that he held in his lifetime, beginning as a teacher, then a lawyer, then a Pima County attorney, Superior Court judge, the governor of Arizona, an American ambassador to El Salvador, Bolivia, and Argentina. Though Castro suffered innumerable instances of social and racial discrimination, he overcame institutional and personal prejudice to attain the life he desired. Raul Castro's career and service serve as dual role models, not only for Mexican Americans, but for all Americans. He said, "At the time I moved to Tucson, just after the cessation of hostilities in World War II, the public school system was instrumental in the subordination rather than the advancement of Mexican students. They were put in vocational classes and discouraged from attending college. I decided what a terrible waste of brain power. In Governor Castro's own words, he said at the time, I intended to take a different track and buck that trend. Indeed, he did buck that trend and open a new path in public service for many of us, including myself." Castro credits the challenges faced to shaping his character and understood that education was the ultimate path to a better life. To him, most important part of the legacy was to inspire Mexican-American children and all children to aspire to do great things, even in the face of adversity. Even in his 90s, Castro continued to work with underrepresented and poor students to encourage them to pursue higher education, to get their education, and to use the obstacles as motivation to make their lives better for others. This bill recognizes an extraordinary pioneer that dedicated his life to public service and to the fight for equality. I appreciate the support of the entire Arizona House delegation for honoring this American legend, and I reserve the balance of my time.